Well, there you are. Welcome to Office Hours Live.
Woohoo!
And lots to talk about today, as usual. But today, I also wanted to emphasize to you really the fundamental choice that we are facing over the next 4 years. Actually, we've already made the choice. We didn't make the choice. Barely a majority of people who voted, in fact, a majority of people who voted made the other choice. Hillary Clinton actually came out as almost 3 million votes in the popular vote ahead of Donald Trump. I mean, we haven't seen anything like this difference between the popular vote and the Electoral College ever in American history. The Electoral College, as you know, yesterday officially made Donald Trump our next president, who takes office in 31 days. So what I really want to talk with you about today is the difference between authoritarian and democracy. And when I say this is a choice in terms of you, and it's a choice in terms of me, and it's a choice in terms of how we think about the not only what's happening and what's going to happen in Washington and in places like North Carolina and elsewhere around the country, but also around the world. The choice between democracy and authoritarianism. And what we see, even before Donald Trump takes office, is a lot of things that I find, and I think you should find also, quite disturbing. The notion of bypassing and denigrating the press. A democracy depends on an independent, free press. That's how we hold officials accountable. That's how officials are asked hard questions. That's how we actually understand what they are doing. That's where criticism often comes from a free and independent press. That's why it's in the Constitution of the United States. But what Donald Trump has already done, he's not even president, 31 days to go, but what he's already doing is denigrating the press. Every chance he gets, all of his rallies, which continued on, he did 9 rallies, he kept on saying dishonest press. He kept on basically getting boos from his rallies every time he mentioned the media, the mainstream media. And it's not just denigrating the press, it's also bypassing the press. It's creating the kind of opportunities through tweeting and through all sorts of deals he's making, like with Sinclair, the Sinclair syndicate, to just give them special access to him as long as they didn't ask him any questions. And the rallies themselves, which he said he intends to continue, where there is absolutely no opportunity for the press to ask questions. He has not had a press conference since July. Now, this is new, because every other president who's been elected has had a press conference shortly after being elected. Donald Trump is even talking about not having press briefings. He doesn't. He's changing the rules, and those rules all have to do with bypassing the press and talking directly to the public through, again, tweets and rallies and whatever other situation. I mean, he's also made videos. Now, Franklin D. Roosevelt had fireside chats, and the purpose of those fireside chats, of something very new through radio, was to be able to inspire and give confidence to the public at a time of dire need during the Depression, and then through World War II. Donald Trump is not bypassing the press in that way. Trump is bypassing the press and denigrating the press basically because he wants to be able to get his views across without any criticism, without any mediation. That's what the media are, without anything between him and the mass of Americans. This is a classic totalitarian trope. This is what, in the 1930s, the people who took over, Mussolini and Franco and dare I say Hitler and Stalin and others, this is one of the first things they did. They suppressed and denigrated the press. But you also have, out of that, is coming a scapegoating. I mean, what Donald Trump continues to do is talk about Muslims, and assume that Muslims and the people he's actually put into national security positions are saying that it's all a matter of Muslims. Don't trust Muslims. This suggestion and this reiteration that Muslims are somehow to blame for what's happening around the world is also extremely dangerous. And without any press to correct him, without any ongoing criticism of what he is doing, these big lies. And this is another thing that I want to draw your attention to, because there are big lies that he is telling. Those rallies that he did, those 9 rallies that were televised, a lot of people saw them. He refuses to acknowledge that Russia tried to tamper with the election. The CIA has said it. The FBI has said it. Trump says no. There is no evidence of that. That is a big lie. This is what authoritarian regimes do. They engage over and over again in repeatedly telling the same big lies. Another big lie that he has been using is that he won in a landslide. He keeps on saying, oh, it was a landslide, a historic landslide. Just the opposite. Obviously, Hillary Clinton had 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. There was no landslide here. But by saying it is a landslide, he effectively repeating in people's minds, it's sort of, a lot of people come to view him as having some sort of a mandate, which he doesn't have at all. He says there was massive fraud. He reiterates this from the campaign, but he has reiterated it over and over again in his rallies after the election, that there was massive voter fraud. That is simply not the case. In fact, there's no evidence of massive voter fraud unless you include Russian interference in the election, which he denies. He also says things like the rate of homicides is up 45%, when in fact we know that that's the opposite of reality. Homicides are down 50% from what they were, and by saying homicides are up, what he is doing in effect is creating the impression in the public that we have got to have more militarization of our police, maybe more mass incarceration. He is laying a predicate for a set of policies that are based upon fantasy and lies. When he says that climate change is a hoax, and he hires people like Scott Pruitt for the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, who deny climate change. Again, these big lies have a chance of being understood not as lies, but as truth, when you have somebody who is bypassing the press and is repeating the big lies. He is doing it after the election. He has been doing it right up to the present day. In 31 days, he's going to be president. He was going to continue to do it. And on and on and on. What this does, in effect, is it creates in the public's minds, at best, some doubts about what the truth is. At worst, it creates in the public's mind a different vision of reality from the actual truth. A rejection of science, a rejection of policy analysis, a rejection of facts. It is a fact-free universe in which an authoritarian, and that is what you have historically, authoritarians basically create their own facts to support their own policies. And you also have somebody who is very vindictive. And what authoritarians always are, they punish their enemies. They say, effectively, they criticize their enemies publicly. They want their own brown shirts or their goons or their followers to attack their enemies. And this is what Donald Trump continues to do. Every time somebody criticizes him, then he says in tweets or in his rallies that by naming that individual person, he sets off alarm bells. And he generates attacks on that particular person. That vindictiveness itself is also an element of authoritarianism. And finally, look at what he is doing in terms of the kind of White House, he's appointing. Authoritarians put their family members, because they're the only ones they can trust, in very high places. What Donald Trump wants to do is bring in his daughter and son-in-law into the White House, give them offices. It's not as if they have expertise about public policy. They have expertise about what Donald Trump personally needs. It's not that they are expert in what America needs. They're expert in what he personally needs. That's another side of authoritarianism. You bring in advisors to protect you personally. Donald Trump is not going to rely solely on the Secret Service. He says he's going to rely on his own private security guards, whose, again, their authorization is to protect him in a way that he needs. But what about the public's opportunity to protest? Private security guards around Donald Trump, paid by Donald Trump, are not going to have any possible responsiveness or any kind of direct responsibility to the public, as the Secret Service obviously does. And look at his appointments. I mean, these appointments are all about people who are loyal to him and people who have come and flattered him and given him everything that he wants. They are not people who necessarily know anything about public policy or about the departments they're going to take over. In fact, most of them have no idea about the departments they're going to take over, or have a record of being against the policies and the laws and statutes, regulations that those departments are created to enforce. So overall, and I could go on, but overall we have here the elements of authoritarianism. And what is so important to understand in terms of what is about to happen in 31 days is that these elements of authoritarianism are exactly the opposite to democracy. In other words, the conflict and the issue and the real choice we have ahead of us isn't left versus right. It's not Republican versus Democrat. It's not the traditional ideological lines in America. It really is authoritarianism versus democracy of a sort that is responsive to America, where public servants understand that they are public servants, where a president understands that that president is accountable to the public, is not a king, is not a dictator, is accountable to the public. That's what we have got to make sure through our vigilance, through our peaceful resistance, to make sure Donald Trump understands that he is accountable to us. We are not accountable to him. Look what happened in North Carolina as an example of what can happen if we are negligent about our democracy. In North Carolina, you have finally a Democratic governor was elected in North Carolina, Roy Cooper. And what did the North Carolina legislature, Republican legislators, do? They passed laws over the last few days that reduced his ability to govern, that made it and restricted the range of possibilities with regard to appointing people over commissions, the number of appointees that he has in the state, what he can do as governor. This is a patent, overt attempt in North Carolina by a set of legislators who don't care about the public, don't care about the public good in North Carolina. They care about partisan power. I want to emphasize this is about power. Democracy, the way our Constitution was set up, was to control authoritative power. The framers of the Constitution in the 18th century, they were absolutely, adamantly opposed to authoritarianism. They understood what a king could possibly do, and they said when they met not only to declare a revolution against England, but also to set up a constitution that would bring Americans together, we are dedicating our lives so that we can preserve individual freedoms and civil rights and political rights. Donald Trump is a menace and a threat to those fundamental principles. Now you ask yourself, what can you do in 31 days? Well, I want you to become actively engaged. You probably are already. You need to become even more actively engaged. And on this page, over the next 31 days and beyond, we'll be talking about what you can do specifically, what actions we need to take. Now let me take your questions. talk about politically engaged. Patricia Harris, could Obama do to Trump what the North Carolina governor just did to his successor? In terms of signing legislation, Patricia, you're talking about signing that legislation that stripped the governor, the new governor, the Democratic governor, of a lot of that new governor's powers. Unfortunately, not, and I say unfortunately not, but I want to make sure you understand, Patricia, that we're talking about institutional democratic small d responsibility. I would not want Donald Trump, Barack Obama, to do that to Donald Trump, because that would undermine our democratic institutions. Gina Armedio, what do you think are the most important things Obama should do in his final days as president? Gina, one thing that he could do would be to pardon a lot of these very young people who came over to the United States when they were very, very young. They are undocumented immigrants. Why not give them, in effect, pardons that would allow them to rest assured that they're not going to be deported? Rodney Bonds, we need that concert on the Mall during inauguration. We need to do everything we can to draw attention to the illegitimacy of this dictator. I have never been so worried about the future of America. Well, Rodney, I'm worried about the future of America, too, and I haven't been quite as worried either. And I'm old enough to have lived through Richard Nixon, as well as Ronald Reagan, and a lot of other things. I suggested on this book, on this Facebook page, somebody actually suggested to me that there be a freedom concert, a kind of freedom unity concert on Inauguration Day. And my suggestion, and the person who suggested it to me, was that that concert have so many of the kind of performers we would be attracted to, Americans would be attracted to, that we would not spend our time that day watching the inauguration. We'd drive down the ratings of the inauguration, but also the proceeds from that concert could go to the American Civil Liberties Union and Lambda and a lot of other organizations that need to be fortified in this peaceful resistance. Now, since I posted that, about 12 million people or more have liked it and agreed and wanted to do something. I am not an impresario. I don't run concerts. I don't know how to do that. That would be like asking me to take all of us to Mars. But several people have contacted me, and I know that there's a lot of activity going on. I don't really know what's happening. As soon as I do, I will let you know on this page. Sally Rogers, who will pay for Trump's private security force? You and I, Sally, through our tax payments, because he will undoubtedly deduct those costs from his own income. Susan Steffies, are you afraid we will go to war with China? Susan, here's what worries me. We are in, obviously, an extraordinarily unstable world right now. And it's a dangerous world in every respect. It's dangerous in Europe, in China, India, Pakistan. It's dangerous in the Middle East, obviously. And we need somebody who has a steady hand, somebody who is thinking through exactly what this three-dimensional chessboard of foreign policy is. And my real concern is Donald Trump is putting people in places in the foreign policy advisory capacity around him who have not a clue about how to handle any of this. In fact, just yesterday, when you had the German authorities very carefully not assigning blame to ISIS for that attack in Berlin, Donald Trump, what does he do? He makes a statement saying this is about global terrorists that have to be eradicated. And then he goes on to say that more Islamic terrorists were responsible for the killing of the Russian ambassador in Turkey. Well, by elevating the notion that we are at war with Islam, what Donald Trump is doing is exactly what the extremists in ISIS want to have done, and that is to be a recruiting device. I mean, if a lot of young people around the world who are Muslim, if they think that there is a war between the West and Islam, well, some of them are going to be recruited to ISIS. Now, is there going to be a war with China? I obviously have no idea. But Donald Trump, why is he antagonizing the Chinese? Why did he have that discussion, that congratulatory discussion with Taiwan, the first one that a president-elect has had in 40 years? Well, because of business interests there. Carol McCarthy. President Obama said he wants to develop young Democratic talent after he leaves office, a capital D Democratic. I would like to know who you think that is and how he's going to do it. Carol, I don't know how he is going to do it or what he has in mind, but I do think that the Democratic Party not only has to get a lot of young blood, but the party has to be completely reinvented. I mean, I sit in meetings and hear about other meetings in which senior Democrats, leading Democrats in Washington, are saying, well, we had the message wrong. Or, well, we really do have to move to the center. That's what this election teaches us. Those are not the right lessons. This isn't about getting the message right. This isn't about moving to the center. This is about understanding we are in a time of extraordinary populist anger, and anger is not necessarily bad. Anger can be a force for a lot of positive social change if it's channeled positively. A lot of people, including myself, did not like and do not like the status quo. We feel that the game is rigged in favor of the rich and the powerful and the privileged. But the answer is not Donald Trump and authoritarian populism, which is actually fake populism, because Donald Trump is recreating the same oligarchy that is already in control. The answer is progressive populism, the kind of thing that Bernie Sanders represented in the Democratic primaries. Roselle Doty, do you think Republicans might actually impeach him? The Republican Congress might. Donald Trump is so filled with himself, so egotistical, so pathologically narcissistic that he could easily overreach in a variety of ways, break laws so obviously that the Republican House has no choice but to impeach him and the Senate to confirm that impeachment. I would not be terribly surprised, honestly, but the question is how much damage is done in the meantime. Tim Felcher, have you offered your services to Trump? Help explain the realities of the economy. Tim, I haven't. But Donald, if you are watching, Mr. Trump, rather, I want to be respectful. I want you to know you can call on me anytime, and I will tell you what I think. Merrill Rose, the way we fight is to make a coalition of blue states. We represent too much of the population and financial power. We have to transform that into political power. Any thoughts? Merrill, I think we need red states as well. There are an awful lot of people in red states who believe in democracy, believe in freedom, do not want to turn this country to an authoritarian, did not vote for Donald Trump for his hatefulness and for his scapegoating and for his anti-democratic, small d, feelings. In fact, I think most people who voted for Trump voted for him because they were sick and tired of business as usual and politics as usual. They wanted to register their anger against the establishment. And so I don't think you should write off red states. I think we need everybody in this peaceful resistance. Dwayne Filbert, Mr. Reich, I appreciate your voice of reason. Where are the other voices? I see Bernie's is out there, but who or where are other Democrats, independents, free thinkers? Dwayne, they are around. I know and admire Elizabeth Warren a great deal. I met and talked with Bernie Sanders a couple of weeks ago. There are other people around, but here's the issue. You and nobody watching now can rely on me or any other so-called thought leader or anybody else out there. In order to make this peaceful resistance real, you, all of us, have got to be engaged. You are leaders. You are the leaders of your communities, or could be, and leaders in many ways of this democracy. Don't for a moment think that there are not millions of people out there who are capable of leading the charge, inspiring others, providing the kind of information people need, providing the kind of guidance and ideas people can attach themselves to. Bruce Brown, I'd like to start a conversation about how to go about forming a separate nation or annexing to Canada. Can you help? Bruce, we fought a civil war over this idea, and we really are one nation. And I think that, although I have kind of with my tongue firmly planted in my cheek, I've suggested to Canadians and I've suggested to other people in California and Oregon and Washington that maybe we should become provinces of Canada. No, this is where the fight is going to happen. This is where either we affirm, confirm, and develop a stronger democracy and a stronger progressive nation, or the world loses the leadership of the United States. The stakes are just too large. Paulo Lim, how can Democrats, that's capital D, make gains in 2018 midterms, given that the big money works against them? They're working against increasingly gerrymandered House seats, and the number of Senate seats they have to defend are extraordinarily high. Paulo, first of all, let me just repeat something I said initially. I don't think right now we're facing the traditional Democratic versus Republican kind of conflict. It's not big government, small government. It's not left versus right. It will become apparent, I don't know when, but it will become apparent to a large number of Americans who consider themselves and call themselves conservatives and Republicans and others, that the real issue here has to do with our civil and political rights and the preservation of democracy. And therefore, I think the possible coalition is very large. I am not particularly worried about the odds that you are talking about. Lori Belela, if we live in a progressive state like California, how do we have meaningful influence over national policies? Well, Lori, we have meaningful influence over national policies in a number of ways. First of all, a big state like California has a huge number of representatives relative to other states because we are so huge here in California, and those representatives do have a voice, even though they will be in the minority in the House. Secondly, we have some very influential senators. We'll have a very dynamic young senator added to the ranks from California. Also, California, remember, is the 6th or 7th largest nation in terms of economy in the world, if you consider it in the terms of economic prowess and economic power. We have the leaders of the American economy here. We need to engage them. We need to talk to the executives of these big high-tech companies and entertainment companies and venture capital firms. I mean, they are here in California, and many of them share the same ideals and values as many other people in California. Time for 2 more questions. Arlene Alexian, we as Democrats must now be prepared to step up and redo all the things our forefathers did to advance our human and civil rights. We will have to march, protest. We will have to vote and oppose what is going on, and get behind our get from behind our smartphones. We have to show up. Show up. Arlene, that's not really a question, but I think you're absolutely right. It's too easy just to sign petitions or just to send money into good causes. I think that we've got to, all of us who are activists, and I think everybody has now got to be an activist, we've got to show up in the sense of not only demonstrating, but also engaging in an active way. Resistance means more, a peaceful resistance means more than demonstrating. A peaceful resistance also means doing everything from writing op-eds and writing letters to members of Congress, and actually, when they are home, going to their meetings. It means going to so-called red states and being actively a presence there, contacting our relatives and friends in those red states, making sure that they're putting pressure on their members of Congress as well. It means running for elective office locally or in your communities generally or in your state. It means becoming a citizen in every respect. And that is, if there is a silver lining in all of this, it's that all of us are now called upon because of our citizenship, because of our children and grandchildren, because of our membership in this society, to become more active than we have ever been before. in all these respects and many others. And finally, Neil Altman, are you taking any time off over the holidays? We would forgive you. And Neil, I'm going to take some time off, and I want to urge all of you also to take some time off and to have a wonderful holiday. It's difficult. I know many of you are still in shock. Some of you write me, you are despairing. Somebody talks to me about the apocalyptic dreams they've been having. There are many, many stages of grief and despair and anger, and I understand that. But I want you to hold on to the anger. Get rid of the grief, get rid of the despair to the extent you can. If you're depressed, I understand that. But over the holidays, hold on to the outrage. Hold on to the anger. Don't get rid of that. Don't normalize the situation. It's not normal. And what we're going to be up against is not in any way normal. Don't become cynical. Don't succumb to cynicism. Hold on to that anger. And then in January, and we'll resume these little broadcasts in January, what I hope we can do together is talk about the specifics, what must be done, how you can channel that outrage and anger and get beyond outrage and anger to actual activities and actions in your community, in your state, and around the nation that will hold on to the values that we hold dear and will also advance the cause of social justice. Thanks very much. Have a wonderful holiday. I want to thank Zoe Umlaut Beck and also Sam Martz so much for all of your help. These are people who have been back there helping us. And again, have a very, very great holiday and have a happy new year.